Hello and welcome to Top Story. The dissolution of Parliament on Wednesday by Italian President Giorgio Napolitano has paved the way for early national elections on the 13th-14th of April. This following the collapse of Prime Minister Romano Prodi's centre-left government last month, Italy's 61st in 63 years. The announcement of early elections came after a failed attempt to form an interim government with a mandate to reform the electoral law, which many blame for the instability in Italian politics. But opposition leader and two times former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi insists that only elections can end the current political crisis. Opinion polls suggest that the 71-year-old Berlusconi, who's Italy's richest man and the owner of 3 of its 7 national TV stations, will win by a landslide. Walter Veltroni, the mayor of Rome, is expected to replace Prodi as the centre-left candidate for Prime Minister. But Veltroni, who compares himself to US Democratic Senator Barack Obama, says he may run just as the leader of the Democratic Party, jettisoning his other allies in the centre-left coalition. Well, joining me to discuss this latest episode in the Italian political saga is Gianpaolo Accardo, a specialist on Italy at Courier International here in Paris. Thanks very much for being on Top Story. What is it about the Italian electoral system that throws up these complications all the time? 39 parties in Parliament, it's extraordinary.
Yeah, but before leaving power in 2006, Mr. Berlusconi passed a bill which reformed the electoral system. We were having a first past the poll system, like in Britain, for example, and then now we have a system which is highly proportional, and there is no restriction. Therefore, every party can be represented in the parliament. This is why we have 39 parties.
And as you say, the law that made this possible was introduced by Silvio Berlusconi when he was Prime Minister the last time. So if he wins, we're not likely to see any changes, are we?
We might not see any change, yes.
Do you think that's a good thing for Italian politics? I mean, how do most Italians feel about it? Do they feel it's evidence of the democratic nature of the Italian system, or do they think it's a recipe for chaos?
No, Italians were quite used to the system that was introduced in 1993 and lasted until 2006. It was a system like I said, like in Britain, because we had 2 big coalitions, a centre-left and a centre-right coalition, and politics seems to be quite clear at that time. But the introduction of the proportional system made politics a bit messy and even more complicated as it was, and Italians were not very happy with that. I think they were more they were happy with the bipolar system that was introduced in 1993, and this is why they were asking for a reform of the electoral system. And even the 2 coalitions were working on it. They were starting to discuss. There was starting to be discussions between Mr. Berlusconi and Mr. Veltroni about reforming the electoral system, but as you know, the political crisis, and the falling of the Prodi government ended the talks.
Some suggest there's almost something Machiavellian about the way Berlusconi introduced this law into Italian politics, that it's designed, in effect, to make sure Italy is ungovernable unless he's in power. Is there any truth in that, do you think?
There might be some truth, yes, because in 2006, when the bill was introduced, Berlusconi was behind in the polls. He was quite sure he was going to lose the elections, and therefore he introduced this system that was a kind of after me. It will be hell, and I'm the only one who can save Italy from that kind of situation, which is what is happening now, in fact.
Assuming he does win, it'll be the 62nd government that Italy will have had in the last 63 years. How damaging is that for Italy?
Italy doesn't know what political stability means. It has, and it needs it dramatically. We had a certain period of stability between 1994 and 2006. We had only 4 changes in the government. There were elections, and that was, people say, a good period. Now stability is something we desperately need, and it seems to be a priority of the next government, independently if it would be a government run by Mr. Berlusconi or by Mr. Veltroni. And the first thing this government will have to do is reforming the electoral system so that we have more stability and more efficiency.
love him or hate him, it is remarkable the way Berlusconi seems to keep bouncing back, isn't it? Despite his encounters with the occasional encounters with the law. How is it that he does it? How does he manage to persuade so many Italians to vote for him every time?
Well, we might say that it's a kind of Tina situation. You know, there is no alternative. Mr. Berlusconi spent most of his time trying to keep his allies away from him and try to keep them away from replacing him. Even though a couple of months ago Berlusconi said, well, the centre-right alliance, the House of Liberties, the so-called House of Liberties, doesn't exist anymore. I'm just leader of my party and everyone is running for himself. He made sure that no one can replace him as a leader of the centre-right. And now, asking for snap polls and early elections, he seems to be the natural leader of the right. And the leader of the other parties, member of his coalition, doesn't challenge him on the leadership. So he's kind of natural leader. There is no alternative.
What about the opposition, though? Walter Veltroni, the leader of the Democratic Party, suggesting he wants to go it alone to break with his centre-left allies. What chances has he got? A relatively young man in Italian terms, but 20 years younger than Berlusconi anyway, 52 years old, mayor of Rome. Has he got a chance?
Well, Mr. Veltroni is very popular. He speaks clearly. He doesn't speak the kind of language Italian politicians are used to, which is very complicated. And he is popular not only in Rome, but also in Italy. As you said, he's young, and he spent most of the last 2 years running conferences around Italy about what he called good politics, nice politics, a new way of making politics. He's inspired, as you said, to Barack Obama, the Democratic candidate for the White House, and he also said he's inspiring himself from Bob Kennedy. So he wants to bring a new deal to Italy, and this might be, he's counting on this element of this new element in Italian politics to be attractive even to not only to left-wing voters, but also to center voters, which in Italy are decisive to
Is it a good move then for him to split off from his centre-left allies? Does that improve his chances, do you think?
But Mr. Veltroni has a problem. He's in the centre-left, but he has to distance himself from Mr. Prodi's legacy. So he needs to represent himself, to act as something new, something far from the actual centre-left other parties. So he has to run alone also to see how much does his party weigh, because it's the first time.
At that point, I'm afraid I'm going to have to stop you. That's all we have time for today. Thanks to our guest, Gianpaolo Accardo of Korea International. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of Top Story. Goodbye.